What's up, everyone? I just want to say thank you so much for making Change Agents top the charts in Apple society and culture. We're so excited to kick this season off. So many heavy-hitting, impactful episodes to come. But before we kick things off, real quick, if you've noticed, Andy looks great in his IRONCLAD hat. You can get this and many more IRONCLAD products at shop.thisisironclad.com. It's at the link in the bio. Thanks so much for making Change Agents happen. We love you all. Goodbye.
How can I help? How can I be useful in ending needless suffering? Do not be afraid of work that has no end.
We have to organize a social movement.
We have an opportunity to lead by example versus just talking, hot air.
I think the more people in this fight, the more we grow. Eventually it could change. The people are the ones that can make the change.
Today, I'm going to be sitting down with Evan Hafer, the founder and CEO of Black Rifle Coffee. Evan spent 20 years in combination of military service and working as a contractor for the Central Intelligence Agency. Afterwards, or towards the tail end of his service with the CIA, he started Black Rifle Coffee, which is committed to hiring 10,000 veterans. Talking about today is the journey from uniformed or military service into the rest of your life, your civilian transition. And about 200,000 service members transition from the military service to civilian life every year. And to say that it's a struggle for some would be a drastic understatement. 46% of those with some combat experience, compared with 18% of those without combat experience, describe their readjustment to civilian life as difficult. Speaking from personal experience, it is a challenge. How do you move forward in your life with a new identity and with a new purpose without constantly looking in the rear view mirror? How do you change your optic from who you were because of what you did to what you can actually become?
I was into coffee from late 90s and then early 2000s. I didn't see, obviously, just like most of us didn't see the global war on terror coming. Right. And it wasn't as if we didn't know there wasn't terrorists out there. We knew that. I always looked at this as, hey, I'm going to get out of college. I'm going to go jump out of airplanes and learn a second language and, maybe get into some low intensity conflict somewhere as a Green Beret. But I'm going to go be a coffee guy. Like, that's what I was doing from the beginning. From 2000, being a Green Beret was more of just a recreational pause in my professional development. It was not meant to be a lifetime endeavor.
I don't think it says that on the recruiting posters. Yeah. Would you like a recreational pause in your professional? Join the Green Berets, travel the world. Were you always going to come back and have a coffee company, or did that idea kind of formed over time?
No, my idea has always been the same, which was like having a 12-kilo roaster in a shop in either a neighborhood or a smaller town where you talk to and interface with the community every day. And you pull incredible shots, espresso shots. You can do pour overs and talk to people. It's never changed. It's always been the same. Black Rifle is actually the first concept, and what I wanted was to have a bougie coffee shop range where you could buy highly custom STIs and
wear a scarf and have an espresso.
Like an ascot. Yeah. We didn't have any real capital for startup. So I started roasting coffee and selling it online, and Black Rifle was the condition of the circumstance. And like every the mother of invention is necessity. I was on the range working for the CIA, and I had my service rifle and a little 1 pound, it's called a fluid bed coffee roaster, which is basically a high grade popcorn popper. So I was roasting coffee on the back tailgate of a government truck, and I had my short barreled rifle that I was throwing around. So, and technically speaking, so I'm a coffee guy. That's what I want to do. Like, I'm still in my recreational phase of professional development, like working for the CIA. but I'm also training and teaching them, former special operations guys, to come and work for the CIA. And I'm one of the most highly competent, this isn't me saying it like patting myself on the back. I am one of the most highly proficient and competent shooters in special operations. So at the time, I'm working at a place where even the selection criteria were dropping guys from tier 1 units. And I'm in the 1% of the 1% for shooting and CQB. So I'm a coffee guy that's technically one of the fastest guns, with a fucking sounds stupid, but that's what it is, truly. So black rifle and then coffee, that is the genesis.
So how did it start growing? When did it really take off? And I'm assuming you came to a place where you had to choose between what you were doing, training guys.
Well, I got fired, so that was that was the biggest thing.
That
right?
also helps.
Yeah, it helps. It's more of like a forcing function to what your professional development track. So at that time, my professional recreation was over, which was okay with me, because I was like, to be fair, I was probably 2 years overcooked, and they should have fired me like 2 years before that for all the horrible shit that I would say to people all the time. And I didn't want to work there anymore. Like I was looking for a way out way before that. I was burnt out. I had 43 deployments, 7 years of my life were deployed, into glorious places. Was burnt out. I was toxic. Like, I will say that. Like, I was burnt out with the bureaucracy.
Did you realize it at the time, or you just say that looking back?
I realized it, and subconsciously, I was trying to get, and I realized it even at the time. I was like, if I get fired, I don't give a shit. Like, I used to tell people that all the time. I'm like, get rid of me. You can't, can you? So eventually that esteem's caught up. Eventually somebody will say, we got you. All right, man. Yeah, we got you. And so when I transitioned into the next endeavor, it was mainly about, how do I pay my mortgage without carrying a rifle for a living anymore? But I knew what I wanted to do. It was like, great, I'm going to do coffee. My wife had a coffee shop. I was roasting coffee. Where the flexion point came was we had a real opportunity to hire vets. And we had been really involved, obviously, in the veteran subculture and a lot of 501s and nonprofits involving, trauma, head injuries just in general. And I was reading all this data on under or unemployed veterans. So I was looking at data, and you're looking at suicide rates, you're looking at the unemployed, and then the people that just are transitioning out, going into full-time retirement, essentially not entering the workforce. Well, when you're 30, 35, 25, and you're not entering the workforce.
Even if you do a full 20, like I joined at shortly after 18. I signed the paperwork at 17, joined at 18. Let's say I did a full 20.
Mm-hmm.
That's only 38.
Yeah.
That's 7 years ago for me. I can't even fathom, here I am. I've done what I did, and now I don't know what the hell I would do with my time.
Well, and that to me, I think, is a direct path where looking at underemployment and unemployment in the veteran community, and looking at suicide rates, and then psychological health, like just health and stability in general, and then talking to people within the subculture, combining those aspects or those pieces of data with your conversations with your peer group as to why are people so unhappy. We realized we had an opportunity. We could directly impact the veteran community through hiring. And the big thing is, I'm not the brightest guy. I'm fairly blunt depending on the project, but I'm very much like lead by example. I don't really give a shit about what people say, you know, especially in this era of social media, of like hot air horse shit, where people are talking all, you know, private jets and Rolexes and Rolls Royces and all this. Just it's fictional, materialistic crap. It doesn't hold any substance in your life, as far as like, that's great you're on a private jet, it's great you're on a Rolls Royce, but you might be the most unhappy person and you're ready to like blow your head off tomorrow.
And you might just be a total piece of shit.
Well, and it doesn't make you a good person.
Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't make you it doesn't make you an ethical person. It doesn't make you a good father. It doesn't make you a good friend. It doesn't make you a good man. You can be just a complete waste of oxygen. And so you have this, you know, all of these different things that people are pursuing from, I would say, a happiness perspective. And it's like the whole thing of like, find something you love and you'll never work another day in your life. Like these like fictionalized versions of life where people think that they can just not work and be a little bit miserable towards achieving a goal. It's like work and sacrifice can be miserable, but the long-term health of the individual, it takes work.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's not easy. And just because it's easy doesn't mean it's good. So I'm looking at, you know, underemployment, unemployment rates. I'm looking at the overall psychological health of the community. And then I'm saying we have an opportunity to lead by example, which I'm a big proponent of, versus just talking like hot air. And now I can go out and I can hire and build an ecosystem of support around the GWAT veteran. Because from my perspective, if I build a culture and a community around being able to have open and honest communication with each other around any and all things that you might be dealing with based on a physical condition or a psychological condition or a financial, whatever that might be, we can have those conversations within a company. And we have those conversations within a company. We have hallway conversations within the company around that. No other company in America, you can walk in and walk down the hall and say, you know what, I've been having a lot of like, here's a good example. So we were talking about this the other day. We were talking about killing people, right? But we were talking about it from a long-term psychological health perspective as to what is it like to carry the weight of taking life. And all of us in this room, we're talking about the gravity of life, how heavy that is and how the long-term psychological effects of that can manifest in different ways. You couldn't have that conversation in another company in America because we're all talking about.
You could at your exit interview.
Yeah. HR would have been down there tomorrow, like within 15 minutes, but we were sitting there with my chief of staff, with the CHRO,
yeah,
and with a couple other people from the company, and, you know, former Green Beret, former Navy, former this, former that, and we're having this really in-depth intellectual and emotional conversation around the long-term psychological effects of taking life. We were having that in the professional workplace. And it was one
you couldn't replicate that anywhere except for a place that was started with a ethos and background like the one that you had. It would be impossible anywhere else. And maybe that's one of the issues that veterans face that come from a combat arms perspective in those organizations. If they end up there, is they feel like they can't have that conversation.
They can't, and then they feel trapped. So when I get into what happens with the veteran, especially a combat arms veteran, I mean, typically you have a very small percentage of people that have actually pulled the trigger down range. It's very small. But then you have a bigger percentage of people that have been shot at. You have, you know, a bigger percentage of people obviously that have been deployed. But you have a separation from your tribe. So you have this like very interlocked community around mission first, you know, very specific as to your conditions and standards, your goals, conditions, and standards. Then you remove that person from their tightly knit and connected tribe, and you take that person out and you put them into an isolated community. And when I look at this from professionally, this is the problem with a PC culture, a a politically correct culture. That person has been doing the most politically incorrect thing as a professional endeavor their entire life. So you take you out of the military, you take me out of the military. Our entire job was putting people in the ground. And then now we're going to go to work for Wells Fargo? And we think that's going to work? It's not. It's not going to work. It's a pipe dream. And then you wonder why people are integrating back into the professional workplace and they're underemployed or they're having psychological problems, especially when they're coming out of special operations, tier 1 or combat arms units. It's because they don't have a landing pad. They're not okay in the context of they can't just conform to the professional work environment. And the expectation they're going to is insane. For any politician, person in the VA, or general officer to assume that these guys are going to make this transition out of what they were doing into the professional workforce and then go, I don't understand why Dale's not fitting in it at Goldman Sachs. That's weird. Would have never guessed that. I can tell you why.
Yeah.
Because Dale has been making jokes about like taking an axe handle and putting it through somebody's skull for the last 10 years. And now he works at a place where he can't say the F word without somebody going to HR. And boy, talk about feeling isolated. Talk about feeling alone.
So how do we build those landing pads? So about 200,000 people a year get out of the military.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know your thoughts on it. You know, the boot camp in the Navy was 8 weeks long.
And it was the toughest 8 weeks of your life.
7 weeks and 6 days too long in my assessment for Navy boot camp. What's the Army? 8 to 10? 12?
Yeah, we 16 because you have basic training and then advanced individual training.
But it's whatever branch you're in, except for, does Space Force have boot camp?
I don't know. That's an interesting
I know
question.
not much about Space Force, and I want to know more. But regardless, so let's say they do have a boot camp.
Yeah.
It takes you from a civilian and it onboards you to the military system. How much time did you have for your offboarding from the military?
I off-ramped. So I went from active duty back into the National Guard and then went into contracting.
I mean, so in the Navy, they have a program, and maybe they have it in the Army too. It was called TAPS. The Transition Assistance Program.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was 7 days,
Yeah.
of which I showed up, and the guy goes, here, I'll sign your paperwork. Now you can skip the rest of this. So, and
Great.
well, I had been messing around a little bit. So, my departure, I had about a year because I had to go through the PEB, MEB board process. So I knew that they were at least looking at my record. I knew the likelihood was, hey, my military service career is going to come to an end of one of two ways. I'm either getting out on my own or you guys are going to medically retire me. But I had that year, so I started doing other things. So it was a little bit easier for me, but I don't know how many E8s, E9s I have seen in their 20th or 25th year. Like their EAS is months away, and they'll say things like, just getting ready to start my bachelor's. It's like, holy shit, man. And I guess my point in all that is there's a distinct process for onboarding. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people will point at the military and say, well, you didn't do a very good job of offboarding me. And I don't know where I land on it. I don't actually think it's the military's job. I think the emphasis should fall onto the service member. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if that's right. That's currently kind of where I land right now, because it's just, the military is not a mechanism that puts a lot of emphasis on that portion of your career. And everybody knows that it's coming at some point in time. And to struggle beyond your service and say the military didn't invest enough, transitioning me out, it's like, I don't know if they ever promised to. But I also don't know who should be responsible for building the landing pad. Like the fact that you could have a corporate conversation around the moral implications of taking life. I think a lot of people will hear that and go, well, that's such an unhealthy work environment. I hear you describe that conversation like that's probably one of the healthiest conversations that those people could have, and it's directly correlated to their improved mental health because they feel comfortable having that conversation around their peers.
Well, they feel safe.
But I don't know how to build that in an environment where you don't have the, you know what I mean? You founded the company with your background and your experience. I don't know how to recreate that system in a place, just to use a blanket term that I know nothing about, but like Amazon.
I don't think you can. I think that you can try, and that's part of the lead by example, which is, I think if you have veteran entrepreneurs starting businesses, they're going to start, I would say, culturally inclined environments that can have these conversations and can, growing a company and a culture around, especially GWAT, because obviously this is our our war. It goes back to, I don't think we can. So this is necessity is the mother of all invention. It goes back to, how do we build an army of entrepreneurs that are out there starting businesses, whether they're starting a lawn mowing service or, electrical, repair, whatever it might be, so they can have the opportunity to go out and hire and make the impact on the community the same way. So everything doesn't have to be at such massive scale. It just has to be something that we're actively looking at changing. I would say one entrepreneur, one person of influence at a time. Let's just say you did 20, you have 4 years to transition out. And you have, 2.5 left to get your bachelor's degree or whatever it is that you're going to do. I think it's almost as if you need to have a transition battalion where you're now in transition battalion, learning to be a civilian because you have been professionally indoctrinated to be a killing machine. Put that into like the context of what people do. You can't go to work for Amazon. You're seen as a monster. Like, you can't go to work in Seattle. You can't go back to academia and look at, I'm going to sign into Columbia and start my degree in philosophy. If you think that you're not going to want to punch the professor of philosophy in the nose and break his face within the first 15 minutes, you're out to lunch. Like, there has to be, I think, goals and objectives associated with performance in transitioning a person out of the military, because it allows you to focus on what your mission is in the military and be the best at doing that and not worry about it. Versus if you're distracted and you're thinking about what you're going to do when you leave, I think that takes away from mission success. And in some cases, I would say critical objectives.
Yeah.
That's the way I look at it.
How has your experience been employing 50% vets? And we're talking,
it's hit and miss.
And we're talking hundreds of people.
Yeah, hundreds of people. It's hit and miss.
Do you expect more of them or the same as a traditional civilian hire?
I've been woefully disappointed from people from the special operations community. They think that they're going to go to work in a civilian organization and the red carpets are going to be rolled out, and because of your hat or because of your cool little badge that you got on your Navy uniform or whatever it is, that everybody's just going to bow down. And
yeah, they're looking for their cape in their closet.
Yeah,
they get pissed when it's not in there. Yeah.
And when you start telling them the world owes you nothing, like this is America, the world owes you nothing. You have to work for everything you get. And it's going to take, a lot of discipline. There's a lot of guys that are like, but come on, man, I was a Green Beret. Like, what? That part of my life is over. You're like, no. And I have been disappointed in what I would say is not their level of performance, because honestly, a lot of these guys are really bright and they're dedicated. They think they should be stepping into like a 6-figure job where they're just automatically promoted to a vice president or a director because of, it said special on their shoulder. Yeah. Or because of somebody has lied to them for their entire professional career and said that they are so special and they're so elite that you automatically deserve a 6-figure compensation as soon as you leave.
Well, they are special and elite, but it's in such a narrow band of an operational spectrum that has nothing to do with what you should negotiate your salary based upon. Unless they're asking you to do exactly what you were very special at.
Mm-hmm.
In which case you'd have a great argument for this is my daily rate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're a breacher. That's great.
Yeah.
Like, we're going to pay you a daily rate to be a professional breacher. That's great. You're trained to do that.
For the two
Now,
people on Earth that have that job.
If you can't run a group of, technicians to push a website rebuild across the line because you have no technological proficiency, what value is it? So what I found is they have to be more patient with the acceleration of their professional development. They have to really, one, they have to put in the time. Two, they also have to kind of work with where they can create the most value, not where they kind of want to create the most value. I think a lot of guys from the mill, they want to be in charge right away too. And like, it just doesn't work that way. It's like you didn't get to just like, Glassman didn't promote you to the head of CrossFit as soon as you got out because you're a SEAL Team 6 guy.
No.
Like, you weren't like...
It would have been a mistake too, actually.
Yeah. Very big.
It's one of the biggest misconceptions, and it's one of the things that I dislike about so many individuals and organizations trying to replicate military leadership in the civilian world. They're leaving out, especially from the special operations community, they're leaving out quite a few things that make leadership really fucking easy when you're a SEAL officer. And that is, these people have volunteered so many times and have been refined and trained and volunteered again and made it through selection process. So from like a 99th percentile, they're all bought in and facing in the correct direction. You have the highest performing team full of the highest performing individuals who want to do what you are asking them to do.
Mm-hmm.
You're like, I'm the best leader in the world. Then you go to a place, again, I don't know shit about Amazon, but I had a conversation recently with a guy who got out of the teams and was dropped in there as one of the advisors. And he's trying to ask a guy to do something. The guy just looks up at him and goes, yeah, I quit. Because he had a bad, he's just like, this job,
bad day.
This job isn't about who I am. I do this so I can pay my fucking car off and my apartment and barely have enough money to eat ramen. I don't care what the mission statement is.
Okay.
I don't care. And you caught me on a bad moment. I quit. That didn't happen in the communities that we came from. So this is like stand up and motivate and lead, all great things. We need to look at it from a different perspective and lens. If you take that approach in an environment with people that don't have the same level of buy-in, you're going to fall flat on your face.
I see it as definitive baggage for professional development. And if you, one of the things that I continue to tell people is like, you have to sacrifice your ego on the altar of business. And the way you do that is you have to kill your previous profession and any associated identity that you've had with it. In the context of, just because I was a Green Beret doesn't mean I'm going to succeed as a businessman. It has no relevance. Now, I can utilize portions of my experience of doing that in order to succeed in business, but I can't say statistically it's going to increase the probability of me succeeding.
It might decrease it, actually.
Exactly. So if we collectively understand that we have to kill portions of our ego in order to succeed, and then offload the professional identity, because when we have too many attachments to our professional identity, we've assigned a lot of what we might do in the future based on the success we've had in the past. And just because you're a good example is just because you're really good at, running through a house and shooting people in the face, doesn't mean you're going to be a great project manager, improving supply chain and logistics. It doesn't have any.
Or great in a boardroom, perhaps receiving some slightly negative feedback.
No. And they want to hang on to that so desperately. And to me, that's a liability, because if you want to develop professionally, what you have to do is you have to assign your success criteria to your new profession, and you have to offload your previous identity. You can be proud of it. You can keep it in your shadow box and talk about it, but that's not what you lead with.
Yeah.
You know, like in SF, right? Guys love their De Presso Labor rings that they wear around. And I intentionally don't have any of that stuff, like ever. Like I intentionally have none of it. Because I don't want people to see it. I don't want people to see it and assume, like, I don't care about it.
Yeah.
So, you know, if I have a big ring and it says De Presso Labor, you know, just because I could free the oppressed at one point in my career, one, I don't like jewelry, but two, I just think it's kind of ridiculous. Anyway.
What advice do you have for employers when it comes to hiring vets?
There's two things. I think it depends on the size of your company, right? So when you have a small company, you can make a big impact. You have a small company, you know, one person might be the COO, the CFO, the HR, like they're doing everything, right? So when you're hiring vets, a thing that you have to realize is like veterans are human beings just like everybody else. They are prone to mistakes and they have failures and they have a complete professional background that has led them to that point. They have to be assessed like every other person. So just assuming that because they're a veteran means they're great, it's a bad assumption. Not all veterans are created equal, just like everybody else, right? So don't give people a pass just because they served. You have to interview them. You have to put them through the ringer. You have to, you know, make sure they're the right fit for the job. I've seen this happen a lot with small businesses. They'll say, he was a vet. And then they auger in. You're like, but that guy, he went to basic training and failed out and he got a dishonorable discharge. He's not a vet, man. Like he's not, or, you know, he was a special operations guy, so he's going to be great. No, no. I've seen that go wrong 1,000 times.
Yeah.
So you still have to do the work. Don't assume that whomever you're hiring, just because they're a vet, they're going to be exceptional. That's just not the case. You still have to do the work. Number two, if you're a company at scale and you have a bigger department, assign somebody to be your veteran recruiter, the veteran HR representative, the person that's out there beating the drum for the company every day, because that person will ultimately be not only recruiting, but then disseminating information, communicating internally and externally. Like you can really make a big impact, not only from pulling people in, but also the continuation of the employment of veterans throughout the organization. Number three, skill bridge is a thing. You know, they're named different things for different units, but the military has done a really good job in the last couple of years of activating programs where guys transitioning off active duty can come to work, and they will pay them their previous active duty salary to come to work for you.
Really?
Yeah. So, you know, seek opportunities through the VA or some of those in order to go out and hire vets. But if people are really interested in it, they really just have to dig in. They got to roll up their sleeves and dig in. Start with your recruiting, start with your retention, then go out and see how you can expand the programs. But we've been able to make a huge dent, I think, just in the last five years. So we went from the underemployment rate being about 2% above the national average as a peer group, as a veteran peer group, to now we're about 2% below. Now, whether or not that's just because people are completely off the market, it's a different data point that we'd have to look at. But I've talked to a substantial amount of people, whether it's a CEO of Home Depot or bigger CEOs, that have made this a very specific goal associated with their company to go out and hire veterans. So I've seen a big impact and shift. When people make this a priority, it will make a national impact. It will absolutely make big impact as far as like the professional organizations, corporate organizations.
What advice do you have to the veterans?
My advice to veterans from multiple points. Number one, your background gets your foot in the door. It doesn't mean that it allows you the opportunity to work there forever, right? So just because you're a vet doesn't mean that they have to keep you employed forever. Like you have to work hard every day for your position on the team is what I like to call it. Two, you got to kill your ego. Like you really do. Like there's a lot of people that attachment to their previous identity, which they should be proud of, is great, but they really have to just slay the dragon in that regard. Like, try hard to professionally integrate, work with your peers, not assume that you know more because, you know, you carried a saw in Ramadi or wherever it was. So kill your ego, listen. And then I would say the fourth is take all the things that you've learned in leadership and management, try to provide structure to the business organization, because that ultimately is the real value that people from the military bring. It's not because they were, you know, a javelin gunner or whatever it was. Like that has zero professional relevance. They've had real leadership, real management experiences that they can apply to business and projects to get things across the line in a way that will quite literally create exceptional value in the organization. So if they did those things, they were, you know, sacrifice their ego at the door of the business, work hard to professionally integrate to their peer group, and then really work hard to apply leadership and management that they've learned in the military to the organization, they're going to succeed. Like, I have no doubt.
Hope you enjoyed the episode today. If you want to learn more about the BRCC Fund, please go to brccfund.org. And if you want to, you can make a donation, or you could just search the website and find out about more of the individuals and organizations that the fund has partnered with, such as the First Command Education Foundation, Candorful, and many others. You can also follow the BRCC Fund on Instagram at BRCC Fund. See you guys next time.
Scene 101A, take 3.
You know, if you're not having fun, it's not going to be good.
We just drove these homeless cars.
Ready?
I don't break anything. I hope we didn't break this camera.
6:30 in the morning. The driving's been a little haphazard.
All right, go for it. Projects like this is just something you dream about.
All right, action.